Hey guys, welcome to Learn to Code Live. The idea of this exercise is to provide an opportunity for us to work together and learn to code truly live. I'm an enterprise architect and engineer, been writing software for 20 years or more now. Worked for startups, enterprise companies. We're talking Fortune 500, Fortune 100, worked with large scale applications, small scale applications. The idea here is if you'll jump on and hang out with me and watch me code live and make mistakes and just all around have a good time as software engineers, I'll give away a lot of my experience for free if you just want to hang out with me. So in short, I look forward to this. This is going to be a short first video. This is just a trial run here. This is part one. We're going to get the project created. We're going to see if I can get in between OBS and switch screens and things like that. So it could be a little rocky, but just hang with me. One of the things that I'm kind of getting tired of is everything that you consume today is so produced that it's just not real anymore, right? Real coding, there are mistakes made, things go wrong, bugs come out. Anyway, let's just do this thing for real, okay? And we'll do this together. So I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio, and we can go ahead and get started here. You should see Visual Studio at this point, and we're just going to create a brand new project. We're calling this Exodus. The reason I chose Exodus is because it is a chance for you to hopefully find an exodus from any struggles or just things you don't understand. I hope that I can help you exodus into a new and greater place with those struggles and issues and stuff like that. Now, in this first enterprise application build, we're going to keep it pretty simple in that we're going to use some very common technologies. I am a full stack engineer, so we will do it full stack. We're going to use a .NET Core Web API backend, and we're going to do a React front end. And so what you'll need to get on your laptop or desktop or whatever, you're going to need to get Visual. You're going to need to get Visual Studio 2019. Go grab the Community Edition. You don't need to pay for anything. Go grab Visual Studio Code. Get a version of SQL Express installed on your machine, as well as just go grab Management Studio. It's free out there, so nothing here should cost you anything. SQL Express will actually get installed with Visual Studio, so if you don't have it, you should be able to grab it pretty easily there. And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to build a pretty basic .NET application, React front end, because React is extremely popular these days. The next enterprise app build could be .NET Core backend with MVC front end. It depends on what the community is looking for. But I think I'm hitting a pretty large community with a .NET Core web API backend and a React front end. So, and also this is not a super produced thing. In other words, what I mean is I'm not sitting in a room where you'll hear nothing in the background. I have a family here. You might hear some things rustling around. I've asked them to be relatively quiet, but that doesn't mean you won't hear life happening in the background. So hang with me, and we'll get through this first one. All right, so we're going to create a brand new project. So it's a .NET Core web application, right? And we can just filter this to, let's see here, web, right? I wanted to filter it down, but that's okay. We can, let me find it here, web. There we go. So we're going to build an ASP.NET Core web application, okay? This is something that's become popular. Maybe we'll jump into those later on. So next, and we're just going to, I'm going to create a new folder for Learn to Code Live. Let's see, live. And we're just going to call this Exodus. Okay. So let's go ahead and create this guy. It's going to walk us through a little bit of a wizard for particular selections that we may or may not want to make, right, when we build it. Okay, so we're just going to build an API application. We're not going to deal with authentication right now, mostly because web APIs are typically authenticated through things like OAuth and stuff like that. We will configure it for HTTPS, because if you were to deploy it, you would need that. Some organizations use Docker. To be honest with you, it's becoming less and less popular. I don't know if that's because of infrastructure capabilities on Azure and AWS these days, or what. So, but that seems to have become a little less popular. So we're just going to create a web API. Okay. And I think this application is going to kind of just be a sales application, maybe like an application where almost like an administrative application, maybe back-end application. We could do it as a front-end application. Give me your feedback. We're just getting started here. But what I was thinking of is maybe almost like a back-end customer sales management application or something along those lines. Oh yeah, I turned off ReSharper. So we'll just take back the original Visual Studio keyboard theme here. One of the things is ReSharper is a pretty cool tool, and it's great and all, but it's super, super heavy. And honestly, sometimes I'm not sure that it really helps that much. So one of the benefits of not having it is it's not running, constantly taking resources in the background. Okay, so when we first get this guy, we're going to get this weather forecast controller. And for those of you that know all of this is going to be review. For those of you that don't, this is brand new, so let me walk you through it. Okay, so this is a web API controller, and all it's going to do is surface some basic information and return it to the caller. So here's a get operation marked with HTTP get. You have in HTTP we have get, post, put, and delete, right? And so post is for creating, put is for updating, delete is for deleting, and get is for getting. And when you build your APIs, especially if they're going to be consumed by multiple consumers, you should keep that in mind. Even internally, even if it's just internal, try and follow the HTTP standards as best you can. Okay, this iLogger is just a way of logging information about something that occurred. This is the built-in logging interface for a .NET Core, right? So it's actually nice. .NET Core has some built-in dependency injection, which you see happening here actually, where it's performing dependency injection on the logger. Okay, and it has built-in logging and some other things. It's nice. I really do like this new platform. So, okay, so if we were to run this, we have to ask ourselves, well, what's it going to do? Well, notice it's going to create a list, okay, and a list of these weather forecast objects, and that weather forecast object happens to be right here. And so it's nothing more than a few properties, right? And what they're trying to do is just kind of randomize this information, right? You see they're using range.next to grab from the summaries, what was it? Cool, mild, warm, right? So they're effectively just trying to randomize this information a little bit and return it to the caller. So if we run it, and I'm not even sure that I have, I don't even think I have Chrome as an input source. So I may have to change that in OBS. I couldn't get my desktop to actually display. If anybody knows, I'm using a laptop. It does have 2 graphics cards in it, right? It has a built-in Intel, and it has an NVIDIA. If anybody knows how to get the desktop capture to work rather than the window capture, it'd be fantastic. Because then I could capture the whole desktop instead. Like I said, this is real world here. We're not a production company here. We're just going to walk through this together and try and become successful. Okay, it is loading. I'm going to go over here to OBS while we're doing that and see if I can create a new window source for the local host here, right? So window capture. We'll create a new one. Okay. Okay, I think I've just about got it here. We'll turn off the Visual Studio source before my laptop just dies. I'm probably skipping some frames right now. Okay, and let's fix the sizing of our local host window here. Get it to where you can actually see the whole window and not just the top left-hand corner here. There we go. And we'll move this up so you can still see my little mug down here on the right-hand side. Okay, so what it produced is quite simply a collection here of information that they created at random, right? And it returned an array. And, you know, if you were to return it as a list, it would still come back as an array. Because JSON doesn't have lists, it just has arrays, right? So this is how you would return a list of data. Now, the nice thing about this is that with a web API, you can easily test these functions using, you know, the browser, or believe it or not, I think in the next video we'll probably dive into something like Postman, or there's a couple other great API you know, testing applications out there that we might use, and so it'll allow us to build a collection of actual API calls that we can test and verify and work through. And I think the benefit of that is that instead of having to, because a post request is a little harder in the browser, put request, delete not so bad because it's really like a get, but it's just that you need something a little bit more robust than just the browser to test your application, right? And so that's kind of the thing. And so I want to make clear that this is a perfect example of how you'd return data in a web API, and we're going to go ahead and get our database going next, and we might get it returning some data from the database or something like that, or maybe we won't get to that in this first live stream. We'll dig in a little deeper in the next one. But the bottom line is that you can test these right here on your local machine, and you can go ahead and return data and everything like that. Okay. So let's go back to Visual Studio. We're going to leave the example code in place, mostly because we are able to. I need to turn performance mode on OBS. It's probably dropping frames at this point. I may have to get a bigger machine to do this. I got a pretty decent laptop as it is, but it may not be good enough. Okay, so over here in Visual Studio, what we're going to do is we're going to leave all of this stuff here, mostly because we'll just leave it there as a template. One of the things I want to go through with you real quick is kind of the startup of a .NET Core application. And we're probably not going to be in here too terribly much until we get a little further down the road. But just to kind of give you an idea of what's happening here. This right here is actually going and finding controllers. And so that's why this controllers folder is so important. And as we build new controllers, it'll pick those up. Okay. This here is just indicating that we can use a different exception page if we're in development, and that'll be true in the case of local testing. HTTPS redirection is just indicating that we will redirect HTTPS if there is an HTTPS endpoint, right? Routing is the capacity to, the default .NET Core Web API routing. So, for example, just how it was localhost / weather forecast. Okay, the way that works is the phrase weather forecast is picked up here in the route. See where it just says controller here, okay, as a placeholder with the brackets. What that's indicating is that it's going to look for the phrase weather forecast, okay, cut off the word controller. It works by convention, right? And so a lot of you may already know this. I'm just going to throw that out there because we are going to be decorating new controllers, right, with routes, and those routes can become very custom based on our needs, right? Used to be in .NET Standard when you build an MVC application, web API. All of this would be prefixed with API. So it'd be like /API /weather forecast. I think the .NET Core team realized that was pretty unnecessary if we're building a core web API, right? So this is a good example of how you really structure it so that way you don't have this weird, /API, prefix. And in .NET Standard, that could be, refactored. You didn't have to live with it. I'm just saying that's what they're doing by default here. Authorization is just a function of authorization, right? In other words, in our case, it's not doing much of anything. And then it's mapping those controllers based off of any endpoints or custom endpoints. It's using the decoration of those controllers to finish that routing mechanism. So, pretty simple, right? The next thing that we need to do is go ahead and get our database going. So let me show Management Studio. Okay, so over here in Management Studio, I've created a new database called Exodus. Okay, and I think what we'll do is we'll stick with it as a kind of a CMS, like a customer management system, right? In fact, maybe we'll do it a little more like Salesforce, right? Because it kind of stays customer focused. There's tons of integrations that we can do with a CMS. We're talking everything from email to importing customers, to exporting customers, all kinds of stuff that we can do, and show some asynchronous work, right, where we do things asynchronously rather than like real time, things like that. So I think this is what we're going to do. So we'll do ID, and we'll just make it an integer. We'll make it the primary key, and we'll make it auto increment, right? And we'll just give the customer a name. I don't know that we'll do first name and last name because sometimes your customers are businesses, sometimes they aren't. I think we'll do contacts. The contact name is a separate table. Okay, so this is going to be the company name. Okay, we're going to say this is business to business. Okay, and we'll make it varchar. We'll do, how about 256. In SQL Server, this is an arguable fact, but believe it or not, if you do things on the 8-bit scale, multipliers of that, right? Storage and indexing is easier because it still has to store and operate off of that scaling, right? So, a varchar 50 is more work to store and scale and index than something like varchar 64, right? So just keep that in mind. I know it sounds crazy, but that in this age we're dealing with that reality. But the truth is that computers haven't changed much in 50 years, right? So they still operate off the same principles. Those principles get hidden from you more than they used to. So okay, so let's just put there address line 1. We'll make it 128, okay, and address line 2. We'll make it 128, and we'll leave that one nullable because that's not as often used. We're going to make this US based mostly because I'm not terribly good with globalization as much as I am localization, with different languages and stuff, for example, for an application. And I don't particularly know the appropriate fields and stuff for global addressing. Right now, if somebody watching here knows how to refactor the database appropriately for globalization, man, I'm all for it. Reach out to me in the comments. Let me know. We can jump on a hangout. You can help me with the refactor, and I can learn something. And at the same time, we can produce and provide a global solution rather than just like a U.S.-based one. So my apologies. It's not that I think the U.S. is better than anybody. It's just what I've done most of my work in. So for the moment, we're going to do city. And we'll make that varchar 128 as well, I think, here. If I can get my laptop to respond. Okay, we'll do state. Now we're going to do state as a state ID or a code because we're going to be able to look up. So we're going to do state ID. That's going to be an integer, and it's going to point to another table once we get there. And we'll do, postal code. Okay, and we'll make that 16. Because I have a feeling that if we go global, somebody help me with that, that'll probably be a little longer in some scenarios. Okay, so for now, that's good enough. That gets us a company. So let's just title this table, we'll title it customer. This is business to business, right? We work company to company, so that this is our customer, okay? So there's our customer table. Let's build our state table. Okay. And I don't know, maybe in the next video we will populate the state table, right, with the list of states. We'll walk through how we might do that, and things like that. That way we can get our data seeded. We might build some test data in the database, right? So anyway, you're walking. I'm trying not to prep too much of anything here because I want you to walk through the whole process with me, including researching how to solve problems, how to get through things that some of the things I may already know, sure, but not everything, right? Some of the things I've done before, but it doesn't mean I remember how I did it, right? So, we'll just name this state, okay? That's going to be the name of the state. So we could also name it name, and maybe we should. So we'll do varchar, and we'll make it 128. That's big enough, plenty. And we'll give it. We'll make it name, an abbreviation, right? And we'll just make that 8. Okay. All right. So let's save this table. This is state. Okay. And if we refresh our list here, we need to go back into customer. And we need to build a relationship, right? So let's see, where is it? Relationships. We'll add a relationship. Come over here. Our primary key is state, ID, state ID. Okay, we'll save that relationship. And so now we have a customer and we have a state lookup. You know what? Let's go back over to Visual Studio and let's kind of start the process of building out our web API, right? And what that might look like with some of the things that we've done here. And we need to also add a Dapper, because I'm going to use Dapper. I'm not going to use the Entity Framework. I really don't like the Entity Framework, mostly because I don't have enough control, and honestly, in enterprise applications, especially when they grow to scale, you need huge amounts of control over your SQL statements. Furthermore, if you end up having to switch to a stored procedure over a table, Dapper can make that basically seamless, right? Because I just change how I make the call. Everything else and everybody else looks the same. So I just like the library. It was built by the Stack Exchange team, so you can rest assured that it's tried and true as far as scale goes, right? And its ability to execute at scale. So we're just going to grab this guy and we'll install it. And we'll use that later for our database access. Okay, so if we look at our dependencies here, just kind of showing you the .NET Core side of things. Dapper's pulled in here. Love this kind of dependency work because actually you can see all of its sub dependencies at the same time. It's actually super nice the way that they did packaging in .NET Core. Okay, so typically you wouldn't hold your data model in the same project as your application, mostly because you tend to have other pieces of the enterprise puzzle that need access to the data model. So what we're going to do is we're going to just create a project. Nope, I want a new project. See, this is what real development is like. Can't even get the right click menu on the right guy, right? Anybody feel my pain? Seriously, it's the struggle's real, okay? So we're going to create a class library, .NET Core class library. I have the recent project templates over here. You don't have to use these if you have it over here, right? These are just recent. So we're going to do that, and we're going to name this Exodus.dataModel. Okay. And the whole purpose of the data model is to truly be representative of the data model. We don't want our view models being the same as our data models. You don't want that for a lot of reasons, but not least of which is the fact that you want your data model to remain and be interacted with as a data model. Okay, so we have the customer model, right? And the customer had some basic properties. So it had an integer ID, right? It had, I think we named it company. I need to get back over to SQL real quick. Company name. Okay. And we have address line 1, 2, city, state, and zip. So public string address line 1. And these names need to be exactly the same because it's easier that way. For one, you don't have to do any mapping because Dapper will do it all. But also because it should be a representative of your true data model. That way people can look at this and they know what your data model looks like. Okay. Now, max lengths and stuff like that can be dealt with in a lot of ways. And we'll probably deal with those, all that data management in a different video. We're not going to deal with it on the data model here. We do need to also model the state table that we just created. So let's go over here. And we'll create a new class called state because that's the name of the table. And it's got ID, name, and abbreviation. Okay, fantastic. Now, I tend to clean this stuff up here as I go. It's just probably a bit of my neurotic nature. So don't feel that you're required to do so. I just tend to. Keeps my classes cleaner. All right, so there's our data model. And let's go ahead and, you know what? Let's go back over to, I think we're going to go back over to Management Studio. And we're going to maybe just seed the database with a little bit of data. So let's just let's hide Visual Studio here. Pull up Management Studio. Okay, so let's take a peek at the customer, and let's just seed it with a couple of rows so that we can select those rows back, right? And do this. So company, Acme, address 123 ABC Street. Thank you. Okay, city, we'll just say somewhere, California. Oh yeah, of course. I have to build some states here real quick. You know what I'm going to do for right now? Because I want to build the state list properly with all states. What I'm going to do for right now is I'm going to trying to get out of here. There we go. I'm going to make the state ID nullable, just so I don't have to supply it, and later on we'll come back here, because in this exercise really all I'm trying to drive at is let's get the basics in place for gathering data and returning. I just want to get a basic controller in place so that you can see how that works. So Acme 123 ABC Street, and city somewhere, and we'll put 80549. That's my zip code. And the next one is how about trying to think of an interesting company name, but I'm gonna go really bland. Test company. Yeah, 123 DEF Street. Okay, somewhere. How about 90210? Okay, there we go. So we have a couple of customers here. Let's switch back over to Visual Studio. Okay. Come on. All right, back over to Visual Studio here. And let's go ahead and create a new controller. We're going to call it the customer controller. All right, so new controller. We're going to just create an empty API controller, okay? And it'll ask us what we want to name it. We'll name it the customer controller. Okay, and here you notice the root defaulted with API /, right? So we're going to get rid of that. Okay. And all we really need to do is surface a get operation. So if we take a look at the weather forecast controller, right, they had a get operation which was an IEnumerable of something, right? So what we're going to do is, and we're going to change this in the next video because we really want to use view models, but for the sake of ease, just to get this controller going, what we're going to do is we need a project reference to our data model, and we're just going to surface our data model, which we won't do ultimately. We'll walk through building view controllers next time. So here we are. We're going to have a public IEnumerable of customer. Okay. Get is what we're going to call it, and we'll surface that as an HTTP get. Okay, and let's see here. You know what? We'll just do this. We'll say using. I'm gonna have to actually bring in a library, but it should happen pretty automatic here. Okay. Should ask me to install the data client. Yep. Okay. There we go. And it's going to ask for a connection string, and we're going to walk through actually setting up app settings for this. But for right now, we're just going to say server equal /SQL express database equal Exodus. and that should imply, I think, Windows authentication, which is what we want. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say var result equal con.query customer. We're going to, in other words, we're telling it to return and deserialize it as a customer. And we're just going to say select star from customer. Okay. And we're going to actually materialize that to a list and then return result. Okay. That right there, while there's more we need to fill in, like app settings and things like that, this right here should actually get us some data. So we're going to start up IIS Express here. We're going to start up the application. I will bring the browser into view, and we'll go from weather forecast to customer, and we should see customer data. And if we don't, we will debug it. So I'm going to hide Visual Studio, bring up the browser. Okay, and here we are. We're going to go to customer, and it blows up. Cool. A connection was successfully established, but then an error occurred during login, and that's probably because I do need to go ahead and define Windows authentication. And I think I can do that with just trusted connection equal true. If not, I'll have to go figure out what it is that I need. But let me just show Visual Studio again. I'll show you the change we're going to make. Right. I think the only change I need is trusted connection equal true. Okay. So we'll start this back up. I'll go to customer. There we go. And let me show the browser here, because I now realize you can't see that. So what you see now is a list of customers that we just pulled from the database. So we've effectively gone full stack here, right? We've created a database, we created a table, a couple of tables actually. We dropped in some data into that table. We created a new controller, we created a data model, right? All of that, and now we're surfacing that information through the web API. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this session. In the next session, I think maybe we'll cover app settings. How do we deal with connection strings that are in app settings rather than directly in the code? How do we collect? How do we retrieve those app settings? Things like that. We'll go ahead and get the states loaded in the state table, and a number of other things. Right? We'll continue our journey here in building an enterprise application from the ground up. If you have any comments, any questions, drop those comments or questions where I can see them and on this video so that I can respond to them. I'll tell you, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I'm just an engineer trying to help other engineers at this point. So I hope that I've been a help even now, and I hope to be a help in the future. And until next time, you guys have an awesome time doing whatever you're doing, and we'll continue this process.